Dreams. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. Langston Hughes.
It's an honor to stand before you in the beautiful Andrews Memorial Chapel and offer reflection. But before I begin that portion of my comments, I want to highlight the chapel tradition here. It's important that we know our history. Westminster students have been going to chapel since the school's founding in 1888 in Dobbs Ferry, New York, by William Cushing. When Cushing moved the school here to Williams Hill in Simsbury, the first building to be erected was Hay Memorial Chapel. And when the school outgrew that space in the 1960s, Andrews Memorial Chapel was built in its place. For over 100 years, Westminster students attended chapel at least 4 times each week, including Sundays and Thursday evenings. And these services were scripted in a Christian Protestant tradition. While chapel is now built twice weekly into our academic schedule, and services are more ecumenical or even secular in their conception, this chapel and all that happens here is essential in our lives. We gather as a community in chapel, as we do for all important moments that celebrate our core values. Throughout this year, you will have the privilege to hear from many different speakers whose messages will encourage you to think beyond yourself and your immediate needs. These stories that chronicle the challenges, triumphs, failures, and redemption of others will build your capacity for empathy and help you to become a better person. That begins by listening well. As part of my interviewing process for the head of school position at Westminster, I had the privilege to speak with students. And while we asked each other various questions, I ended the session by asking the students about their favorite traditions at the school. One answer in particular continues to resonate with me. Will Rizzo, last year's head prefect, said that chapel was his favorite tradition. That answer in that moment made me catch my breath. First of all, what student in high school says that chapel is their favorite tradition? How could he possibly have the courage to say something like that in front of his peers? And then, what sort of school makes it okay for a student to be that honest? In a word, Westminster. Westminster taught Will to cherish the tradition of chapel, to take seriously this time in his day to sit and listen, to contemplate the stories of others, and to think more broadly about his own character and his responsibility to others. The school's mascot, the mighty, mighty martlet, is a mythical bird who's without feet, which means from its birth to its death, the martlet never rests. It's always pushing hard in a continuous effort to move forward, regardless of the challenges it faces. And I hope that resilience, that grit characterizes all of our lives here. The only place that you will see a picture of a martlet with feet is here in Andrew's Chapel above the door. And that is because to be the best versions of ourselves, we must stop and rest, think inwardly, and embrace our spiritual core. Cultivate, if you will, grace in ourselves so that we have the strength and the courage to continue our journey. Will Rizzo knows that, as do generations of Westminster alumni. Let us continue that tradition as we move forward this year. My first official day of work at Westminster was July 1st. It was a day that I had been looking forward to and somewhat dreading for months. That I had such a range of feelings shouldn't surprise anyone. I bet, in fact, it's how many of you are feeling as you start the new year. We're all excited by the hope of new opportunities. We're dreamers who want to make our wildest imaginings come true. That's natural. But I was also scared. I bet you know that feeling too. What happens if I made a mistake in coming here? What happens if I don't know the answer? If I don't make the right decision? If I don't fit in? What happens if I'm not good enough? One would think that at my age and my level of experience, that I would have long since shed my high school self. But my questioning and my feelings are normal. Regardless of age, we feel uncertain, uncomfortable, and scared as we push ourselves into new challenges. We doubt, we hesitate, we question. So, how do we move forward? Cooper Kistler, in his prefect address to the school community on Saturday, urged us, rightly, to chase discomfort. How do we brave this discomfort and find the courage to move forward? We use our resources. My first stop on my first day of work at Westminster was not Kai's study, which is the name of the head of school's office. For me, my first stop was at St. Mary's Church at the bottom of Williams Hill. I did this for two reasons. One, I knew I needed to seek refuge in a quiet space before the craziness of school life took over. I needed to breathe deeply and think clearly about my purpose. And finding a space, just like the one we have here in chapel, mattered. I was also using my resources. For me, God is important. I believe that some sort of higher spiritual power helps me through my life and supports me in my challenges. I know that not everyone has the same belief system as I do, and that's okay. What matters is that you find a source of faith and strength to tap regularly. Resources abound here at Westminster. I spent the summer relying on Mr. Decanter, Mrs. Keogh, Mrs. Collins, Mrs. Kirsch, Mr. Bailey, Ms. Babbage, Mr. Rashid, Mr. Ryan, Mr. Bergnano, Mr. Sester, Mrs. Heckman, Mrs. Hall, Mr. Dronkus, Dr. Smith. I can go on, but I think you get my point. This summer, I had so many people who patiently answered my questions, even when I asked the same thing twice or three times. They sat with me in meeting after meeting as summer slowly slipped away from them to give me good advice. They showed me where things were, and they made suggestions for me to try some new adventures. They were quick to laugh with me and they willingly commiserated with me when the Delta variant had us scrambling and changing plans. Heck, Mr. Rashid even went with me to a Red Sox-Yankees game and did not rub it in my face when the Yankees completed their sweep of the Sox. There's so many people who are poised to support you, but you have to use those resources. You have to have the courage to ask a teacher for help, or drop in on Mrs. Curtis for learning support, or request a peer tutor. You have to be willing to be honest and share your feelings with your advisor, instead of telling them that everything is fine. You have to be willing to admit mistakes. Part of the challenge in chasing discomfort is the mistake part, the risk of failure. It's what puts the dis in discomfort. You will not get everything that you do here at Westminster perfectly right. You're not supposed to. In fact, you may get very little perfectly right, but the people in this community, teachers, advisors, friends, will be valuable resources as you fix mistakes, learn something new, and become that better version of yourself. The last resource I want to point out is you. You are your own resource, so take care of yourself. What do you need to do regularly to feel good? Is it working out? Listening to music? Getting a good binge watching? Talking with your parents? Hanging with friends? Sleeping? All of the above? What is it that refreshes and renews you so that you have the stamina and energy to chase discomfort? Find the answer to that question. At the end of Toni Morrison's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, Beloved, Paul D. tells Setha, as she struggles to find meaning and strength for the newest version of her life, "Ah, girl, you're your own best thing." He's right. You are your own best thing. Remember that and use your resources.
An Apache Prayer. Looking behind, I am filled with gratitude. Looking forward, I am filled with vision. Looking upwards, I am filled with strength. Looking within, I discover peace.
Thank you, Janessa, for starting chapel today with such a wonderful Langston Hughes poem on which to reflect. And thank you, Shelby, for sharing that prayer to give us strength beyond these chapel doors. I sought help from both of you, and you answered my call. A last note about tradition before we leave chapel today. We process out of the chapel in order of class, led by the head prefect and the head of John Hay, after the Westminster hymn is sung. Of course, normally we are all going to sing loudly and joyfully, but as you've heard, given our COVID situation, we'll listen loudly and joyfully to members of the chamber choir as they sing the hymn for us.